We're now on our last session. We're talking about improve. We've talked about the different steps with identify and learn, and now we're moving on to improve. Improve is just basically looking at the different aspects of what we can do to make this teaching go on and also strengthen your practice as well. Last time we talked about the idea of extending the lesson. So now we're going to kind of look at what we can do to kind of make it more relevant for the next year. So the first step we're looking at is talking about the first use. How did you feel about using it the first time?
I thought it went really well the first time. I was really pleased with how engaged the students were, how they were really self-driven in what they did. It didn't, require a lot of help from me, which was nice. They were very independent and engaged.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the students wanted to actually learn and figure it out. For them at that age, it's just one of those things, figuring out something and finding the clues and stuff like that's really fun for them. So they were really engaged with it. And I think that it went really well. And something like you said, we could definitely extend it. We're looking at some of the data and looking at the stuff that went on in the class. And we set goals, and the goal was to try to figure out how this would help them with their testing long term in terms of finding the stuff. But what was the one of the hang-ups that you noticed with it in terms of the assessment not being able to go on?
So while I was able to informally assess them there in the actual lesson, I didn't really get a chance afterwards to follow up with assessment in a different format. So there wasn't time before we were unfortunately sent home for the year for us to do any formal assessment on this particular skill. So it was a little disappointing just because the only assessment that I really had was that in the moment of the activity itself. So I would love to be able to see how it translated into a new passage and whether or not they were able to identify the main idea on their own in a different format, in a different structure, in more of a formal setting. But unfortunately, we didn't have that opportunity. So it's hard to know for sure just how effective it was without it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's difficult is a lot of times you have these great goals, but sometimes you get a roadblock where you can't be able to check and see the progress of what you've done. So the sad thing is you might not – do you get to work with these kids next year?
I don't know yet. It depends on the schedule. So, there's a chance that I might, but there's a chance that I might not as well.
Yeah, so you might not even ultimately know if you get to see their success.
Right.
Which, oh, man, I hate that for you. Looking at the data gathered, and we looked at instructional versus non-instructional. We talked about this a little bit for this recording. Mm-hmm. We looked at instructional time, and when I looked at the video sessions, it came out to about 15 minutes of you talking between giving the initial instructions and then discussing how you wanted them to find their partner for the words they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that's really good because it shows that you value the time of them working, and the time they spent working was much more. You spent about an average of 35 minutes with the students working, which shows that you're trying to give them more time to work versus you talking.
Yeah. I was I didn't really know how it was going to go because it was the first time I had ever used this strategy, so I wasn't sure, how well they would understand their task and what they were supposed to do. But we went over that anchor chart at the beginning and just how we had already taught into them locating and determining a main idea. And so we reviewed that, and then I explained that what they were going to be doing, and then they started working, and they were very into it. But I watched my time carefully in the sense that I didn't give them too much time, so they didn't have idle time. I sort of cut them off actually kind of a minute early, I felt like, because I wanted to make sure that they didn't, lose focus and become disengaged. So, I kind of structured it so that they had that independent time to read and determine their main idea. And then the second part of it, of course, was them finding their partners. And it worked out that they were able to utilize all of their time very effectively and really didn't waste any time. But they were also very engaged the whole time. So I felt like it was very effective time-wise.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the fact that you were able to adapt the lesson to what you wanted it to be. You took a strategy from elevations, which is focused on just doing task cards and things like that, and you adapted it to reading, which is one of the biggest struggles with our students in our county is being able to read a formal text and take away the main ideas. And
Right.
so that was a great idea, especially getting them ready for the milestones and things like that, because they got to be able to read those passages on their own and be able to relay the main ideas from it.
Yeah, it was,
So,
it was definitely differentiated, but I really think that's one of the things that I really like about those strategies is that they are adaptable. They're not, you can use them in a lot of different ways and formats. You just have to kind of be creative in the way you think about using it. But I agree, it's really a great strategy.
yeah, I did a great job modeling that for them as well. So the next step that we're looking at is we kind of want to talk about the direction that we want to go with this. So one of the things I was thinking about is I had some ideas to show you, and the first one was looking at a checklist during the session when we were looking at the video and stuff like that. Not video, but the notes and things like that. I noticed that you did ask a lot of questions to students to make sure that they felt comfortable with the task, right?
Yes.
And then anything that after you finish presenting and modeling for the students what you wanted them to achieve, you're able to repeat anything that they didn't quite understand, which a lot of the students seem like they did a good job of just listening to you.
Yeah, they did. The one thing that I felt like I sort of had to make sure that they understood at the end when they were trying to find their partner that um, they didn't just go with the first person they came to, because what they didn't realize is that all the passages were about bees, but they were different passages about bees. So I wanted to make sure that they really took their time to listen to all the different people and to make sure that they actually found their partner and not just the first person they came to. So that was the one thing that I felt like I had to sort of rephrase for them, if you will, in the moment, to make sure that they actually kept going until they heard all the passages.
Okay. You and I both agreed that we don't really feel like there's any big mistakes with the students. They seem to be getting it on their own really well.
Yeah,
So
they actually got it right, which was really shocking to me. They didn't really make mistakes. Once they realized they had to listen to everybody, then they were able to find their partner. And but yeah, it was kind of surprising that they didn't. I was really expecting some of them to mess it up, and they didn't. So.
yeah. And I thought you did a great job of avoiding giving away the answers. I didn't see you giving any answers away to the students at all.
That was hard too, not to hint to them that all the passages were. I didn't want to just flat out tell them, the passages are all about bees, because then they would have realized that it was trickier than, I was deliberately trying to trick them in a way. And it kind of would have given it away. I really made them, and it was funny because the first time I remember, like, one of the kids listened to one person's main idea and they were like, oh, I think that's it. And then they listened to the next person and they went, wait a second, your passage is about bees too? But yeah, it was kind of hard not to give that away to them. But it was hard, but I'm glad that I didn't, because it was fun to see their reaction when they figured it out.
Yeah, that's true. So looking at the next part, says provide sufficient wait time. And I think you did a good job with that. You didn't rush them to read the text. You gave them plenty of time to read at their own pace, which is really important, especially with kids that are struggling readers. And you did such a good job with that.
Thanks.
Looking at some of the things in terms of direction and ways we can progress monitor with these guys is I thought one of the things you could do is we could use Study Stack and make a matching game with it and have the word here find the term down here and have the kids go to the smartboard and touch it where it matches up. And it gets them out of their seats a little bit.
It's a great way to build the vocabulary. There was definitely some tricky vocabulary in the text that were, it was a nonfiction passage, so, there was definitely some scientific terms as far as talking about, the language of the text specifically. So it would be great to be able to sort of reaffirm those vocabulary words with something like Study Stack. I think that would work really well.
Yeah, like it gives them time to have a game interaction in the class too.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing we talked about was the idea of maybe doing a exit ticket, which a lot of times that can give you a lot of feedback that you wouldn't normally get with a conversation.
Yeah, this is something that they're used to doing when we do instructional conversations and JPAs. So they're very familiar with doing, and we call them reflections. So they would see that as just a normal part of a different type of activity that they're used to doing. So I think it would work really well to see, how well they felt about the activity, because I thought it went great, and I think they really enjoyed it, but I don't know that for sure because I didn't use an exit ticket.
Okay. And then the last thing we're going to look at with the last part of our 5 criterions, we're going to look at the next steps plan. And we've already gone through the steps of talking about planning this, but also we'll kind of talk about at this point since you have it on your screen.
Yeah.
All right. So the first goal that we talked about was being able to find the main idea on their own. And the progress with it, we kind of said it was good, and they did it well figuring it out on their own, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the next actions that we kind of determined together is that you would like to compare it to formal assessments, which you didn't get to do.
Right. Yeah, I would love to be able to repeat this same sort of basic task of determining the main idea in a short passage like that, but with a totally different passage. Like I said, I would love to see it in a formal assessment setting, but of course we didn't get to do that.
Yeah, because COVID knocked everything out so quickly. Right. And then also you said maybe potentially add a different passage to it to maybe adapt it to see if you could find something else, because definitely with the milestones, you always have multiple passages.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And, it's even something that they could possibly, read a couple of different passages and find it and see if there's any similarities in the passages and those sort of things as well. So.
Yeah. And so the time that we try to implement this would be in the fall of 2020, going into your next group. And hopefully maybe you might have your group you had last year. They're nice enough to do that. That'd be great. It'd probably help your students transition easier if they did that, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And your commitment level, I'd say, is definitely a 5 because you're definitely working hard to try to make sure that you're using these elevation strategies.
Yes, I really like the elevation strategies because they're not rigid in the sense that they're very adaptable for whatever subject you teach, whatever grade level you teach. You and I had talked about I could totally see using this with my 8th graders just as easily as my 4th graders. And so I'm really thankful to have the strategies because they are so adaptable.
And I like the fact that it's geared to helping ESOL kids, but it doesn't show it at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't single them out at all, but it definitely targets the needs that they have as far as being able to practice those listening and speaking and reading and writing skills. So
yeah,
it's just good practice for all students, honestly.
Oh yeah. And then the last goal we talked about was speaking complete sentences, and the progress that you said they made progress since the beginning of the year, but you want to give chances for them to present their stuff so you can see if they're really speaking complete sentences.
Right. Yeah, so just more opportunities for speaking in front of the class or in front of a small group to make sure that they are using complete sentences. That's one thing that they struggle with is just answering in yay or nah or no or whatever and not really using complete sentences. So.
And then the last thing that you said with that in terms of next actions for complete sentences was to find another strategy from elevations that you can maybe use in addition to finding your match.
Yeah, there's definitely companion strategies that they give, and I think it would be fun to find one that's similar and working on similar goals but is different so that they can practice it in a different way.
Okay. So the commitment level, and this one you're definitely at a 5 because you want to extend to it, which is great. And that's your ultimate goal was to extend the lesson and also use elevation strategies. That was our whole goal with this. But just getting more in the habit of using elevations.
Right.
It's the strategies we have, and a lot of times we have all these great resources, but we never use them. So I think you did a great job of seeking out elevation strategies to use, and I can't wait till it's fall to talk with you more about working on these with the students that you have next year.
Sounds good.
So I want to thank you again for your time for coaching, and look forward to working with you again.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.